her life, Issa had believed that her father, Edward Caldwell, had chosen to adopt her and give her the stability and love she'd always longed for. But on that golden Saturday morning in the Caldwell mansion, everything she thought she knew began to unravel. Issa lay draped across the plush living room couch, her dark braids intertwined with colorful clips that caught the sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows, scrolling absent-mindedly through her phone as the polished hardwood floors gleamed around her. Down by the pool, Edward sat at his wrought-iron table, the steam from his coffee curling in the warm air as he watched the morning news on his tablet, dressed in worn jeans and a pale blue button-down shirt with the sleeves casually rolled, an image of weekend ease and fatherly devotion. "Miss Issa, would you mind scooting your feet over? I need to clean under there," came the gentle, practical voice of Maria Alvarez, the woman who had arrived in America with nothing but determination and, over 11 years, had become far more than a housekeeper, a confidant, a guardian, the closest thing Issa had ever known to a mother. Embarrassed, Issa tucked her legs to one side and muttered an apology, watching Maria's slender form glide the vacuum into the space she'd just vacated. As Maria worked, she asked about Issa's science project, genuinely interested in biodegradable plastics and lab partners, and Issa found herself spilling the details she'd only ever shared with school friends. When Maria finally turned off the vacuum and announced the lower level was done, Issa leapt to her feet. "Let me help you upstairs. This place is boring without you," she said, bounding ahead of Maria up the grand staircase with its carved banisters and plush runner. From beside the pool, Edward called after them, "Maria, please give the attic a thorough dusting today. It's been neglected for too long." Maria nodded dutifully, and Edward added, "And Issa, you can come swim with me once you're done. There's nothing up there for you." Issa's forehead creased. "Why can't I go to the attic with you? You never let me up there." Edward offered a light-hearted shrug. "It's just old boxes and cobwebs. No place for a young teenager," he said, his tone easy, but his eyes flickered with something concern or something darker. Disappointed, Issa retreated to her room, texting Carla, but unbeknownst to her, Maria slipped away to the garage, returning with a small brass key she had been entrusted with over the years. As Maria climbed the narrow attic stairs at the end of the hallway, Issa's curiosity burned too fiercely to be contained. She crept along, pressing herself against the wall, and when Maria reached the pull-down hatch, Issa followed a heartbeat later, her footsteps silent on the carpet. Poking her head into the attic, Issa saw Maria setting down her bucket of cleaning supplies under a single bare bulb that swung slightly overhead. Old furniture lay draped in yellowed sheets, and towering stacks of dusty boxes created a labyrinth of forgotten memories. Maria spun around, surprise flashing across her face. "Miss Issa," she began, her voice low but urgent. "You know your father said—" "Please, Maria," Issa whispered, her cheeks flushed. "I need to know what he's hiding. All my life, he's kept me away from this place. Why?" Torn between loyalty and compassion, Maria sighed and set her bucket down. "This is dangerous, Issa," she warned. But Issa stepped forward, eyes wide with determination. "I'll help you clean. We can finish before anyone notices." As she reached out to lift the corner of an old blanket, revealing the edge of a weathered wooden trunk, a sliver of sunlight fell across an old photograph lying half buried in dust. A photograph of a woman Issa had never seen before, holding an infant in a hospital room, with her father standing watchful beside her. Issa's breath caught. The world seemed to shift beneath her feet as she realized that everything she believed about her past and the man she called Dad might be nothing but a carefully woven lie, waiting to be pulled apart. "Please," Maria exhaled heavily, knowing that arguing would only waste precious moments and risk Edward discovering them. 10 minutes, she finally relented. "Then you go straight back to your room." "Deal," Issa agreed, excitement fluttering in her chest. Together they set to work, but Isa found her attention constantly pulled toward the relics piled around the attic. An antique wooden baby pen stood against one wall, battered yet still sturdy, while nearby lay boxes filled with tiny clothes and long-forgotten toys that must have belonged to someone's earliest years. In the corner, a bassinet was draped with a protective sheet, its curves hinting at lullabies once sung long ago. Why would Dad keep all this baby stuff up here? Isa wondered aloud, her fingers tracing the faded paint of the pen. Maria only shrugged, her focus on dusting the high rafters. Then a brightly colored box caught Isa's eye. She knelt and opened it, revealing a small collection of children's books whose covers were worn but still illustrated with cheerful scenes. She lifted one with cartoon animals and giggled at the playful pictures. As she flipped through its pages, something slipped out and fluttered to the floor. Isa bent to retrieve it and froze. It was a photograph. Her breath caught as she recognized her father, much younger, standing beside a striking black woman lying in a hospital bed. In her arms, an infant swaddled in a blue blanket. Isa's heart pounded. This woman's features mirrored her own reflection. The same deep brown eyes, the identical high cheekbones, the warm, knowing smile she saw in the mirror each morning. "Maria," Isa whispered, voice trembling. "Who is she?" Before Maria could answer, the sliding glass door by the pool clicked open. Maria's face went pale. "Quick!" she hissed. "Hide it and go!" Isa clutched the photograph to her chest and descended the attic stairs in a blur. She reached her bedroom just as Edward's voice drifted up the hall. "Isa, are you up there? I was thinking we could go out somewhere this weekend, just the two of us." Her rib cage felt too tight to breathe as she slipped behind her desk. "Sure, Dad," she called, struggling for calm. She concealed the photograph behind her back as Edward appeared in the doorway, his relaxed smile faltering as he took in her flushed face and darting eyes. "What are you up to?" he asked softly, though his gaze hardened. "Nothing," Isa replied too quickly. "Just texting Carla." Edward's eyes flicked to her hidden hands. "What's that you're hiding?" "Nothing," she lied, but her voice cracked. He crossed the room in 3 long strides and demanded, "Show me." Reluctantly, Isa extended her trembling hand, revealing the photograph. "I found this," she said. "Who is this woman? And the baby?" Edward's face drained of color. He snatched the photo and studied it as if seeing it for the first time. His expression hardened, and he strode into the hallway. "Maria," he called, his voice colder than Isa had ever heard. Footsteps pounded the attic stairs, and Maria hurried down, eyes wide with fear. "Mr. Caldwell, I can explain," she began, but Edward cut her off, eerily calm. "I entrusted you with a simple task, Maria," he said, voice taut, "and you disobeyed me." "Sir, please," Maria pleaded. "She begged me." "I don't want excuses," Edward interrupted. "Pack your things and leave today." Isa's chest tightened. "Dad, no. You can't fire her. It was my fault. I forced her to let me come up." Edward ignored her pleas. His gaze stayed fixed on Maria, whose shoulders sagged as though the weight of the world rested on them. "I'm going out," he announced. "When I return, I don't want to see you here." Tears sprang to Isa's eyes. "Dad, please, I love Maria. She's been part of our family for years. This is nothing compared to what she's given us." Edward's jaw clenched. He turned away, clutching the photograph so tightly his knuckles whitened. Isa swallowed hard, crestfallen, but she couldn't let it end there. "Dad," she said softly, stepping forward. "Who is that woman in the photo? Why are you so angry about it?" After a long, agonizing pause, Edward exhaled, his features drawn and haunted. "She was my sister," he said, voice strained. "She died in childbirth, and so did her baby. I visited her that day." This was the only photo I had of her, of them. Issa's breath trembled in her throat. Then why hide it? Edward turned away, the photograph pressed to his heart. It's too painful, he whispered. We'll not discuss it again. He strode past them both, leaving a silence so heavy it seemed to press the walls inward. Maria looked to Issa, eyes shimmering with unshed tears, and Issa realized nothing would ever be the same. Issa's heart pounded as the front gate's latch clanged shut. Her father was back already. Panic and resolve warred inside her. She couldn't let him catch her poring over his carefully concealed past. With trembling fingers, she slipped the wedding portrait into her pocket, closed the album, and slid it back into the dusty cardboard box. Taking a steadying breath, Issa hurried to the attic door, pulled it closed, and climbed down the narrow rungs more quietly than before. Her mind raced. If that woman wasn't his sister, but his wife, then who was she in relation to Issa? And where did that leave Maria's sudden dismissal? The photograph sealed away, the secrets he'd guarded all these years. She reached her bedroom just as Edward's footsteps echoed on the landing. He appeared at her doorway, face still stern but softer now in the late afternoon light. Issa, he said quietly, I thought you might have questions. Issa looked up, her eyes red but fierce. Questions? You've lied to me my whole life, Dad. Who was she, really? And why didn't you tell me about Mom? Edward's jaw tightened. He stepped inside and closed the door behind him. I've tried to protect you, he began, his voice low, from a past too painful for a child. He held out his hand. Come with me. Bewildered but curious, Issa followed him silently down the hall to his study, a room she rarely entered. Edward sank into his leather armchair and patted the seat beside him. Sit, he said. If you're old enough to open that attic, you're old enough to hear the truth. She perched on the edge of the chair, the wedding photograph burning a hole in her pocket. Edward reached into his desk drawer and withdrew an envelope sealed with wax. He broke it open and pulled out a bundle of yellowed letters tied with a ribbon. These letters, he said, handing the top one to Issa, are from your mother, Lillian. Issa's breath caught. She unfolded the fragile paper and saw her own name in her mother's looping script. To my dearest Issa, I pray you will one day know how fiercely your father loved me. Tears blurred Issa's vision as she read. The letters told a story of love and loss, of a vibrant young couple whose happiness was cut short by a tragic car accident that claimed Lillian's life while she was 5 months pregnant with Issa. Edward's sorrow had been so unbearable, he had hidden every trace of her, including the truth about the adoption she'd always assumed. He couldn't bear to see me grieving, Edward choked out. So he told me to leave, to build a life for you, without the shadow of that pain. He looked up, eyes glossy. I thought I was protecting you. I understand sorrow, Dad, Issa interrupted gently. But I needed to know that she existed, that she loved me. Edward closed his eyes and nodded. You deserve the whole story, Issa. I'm so sorry I kept her from you. He reached into his pocket, retrieved the wedding photograph, and held it out. This is your mother and me, on our wedding day. You should have seen her smile in person. Issa took the photo and felt a warmth spread through her despite the cool office air. She touched her fingers to the edge of the picture and then opened her arms. I want to meet her, she whispered. Edward rose unsteadily and enveloped her in a trembling embrace. Tomorrow, he promised, voice thick. Tomorrow, I'll tell you everything. For the first time, Issa felt the heavy walls around her family's secrets begin to crumble, and in that moment, she knew her life would never be the same. Issa didn't pause to say goodbye. She bolted for the front door, her backpack thudding against her shoulder with the weight of the secret it carried. As she slid out into the driveway, the late afternoon light felt harsh against her flushed cheeks. Edward looked up from his laptop through the French doors, his expression unreadable, but Isa didn't wait to decipher it. She sprinted down the path and into her car, slamming the door shut before he could call after her. The drive to Carla's house was a blur of red lights and winding streets. Every so often, Isa would glance at the envelope seal peeking from her backpack, imagining the truth written on those pages like a trapdoor swinging open under her feet. How could the man who raised her have hidden not only her mother's existence, but the very legal proof of her birth? Memories of mornings in the kitchen with Maria, of scraped knees and comforting hugs, of bedtime stories and laughter, everything seemed borrowed, fragile. Carla opened the door before Isa could knock, concern flickering in her eyes when she saw Isa's pale face and disheveled hair. Carla ushered her inside and onto the couch, pressing a glass of water into her trembling hands. "What happened?" she asked gently. Isa exhaled shakily and pulled the envelope from her backpack. She opened it on Carla's coffee table, spreading the papers out as though afraid they might vanish. Carla's eyes widened at the divorce certificate. Edward Caldwell, husband; Lena Rivera, wife; date of dissolution 17 years ago; child, Isabella Caldwell. "Your mother's name is right here," Isa whispered, as if saying it aloud would shatter the fragile paper. Carla reached a hand across the table and took Isa's. "Isa, this is your proof. You deserve to know everything." Tears slid down Isa's cheeks as she nodded, relief and fury twisting in her chest. "He told me she never existed. He said she died alone." She swallowed hard. "He lied about Maria, about everything." Carla squeezed her hand. "Let's figure this out together. First, we'll photocopy these documents and find a way to talk to your mom's side of the family. You need answers, Isa, and no one can deny you the truth." Isa stood abruptly, determination replacing her despair. "I need to see him again. I need him to explain." Carla rose, following her into the hallway, where the late sunlight slanted through the windows. "Tonight," Isa decided, "I'm going home. I'll confront him." Carla nodded. "I'll be there with you. You don't have to do this alone." As Isa gathered her papers, the knot of fear in her stomach loosened into resolve. The man who'd been her father would have to face the daughter he tried so hard to shield from the past. Tonight, the attic's dusty secrets would finally have to be explained, and Isa would no longer be afraid of the truth. Lena's breath caught, and she clasped her hands in her lap. "He told you that?" she repeated, voice trembling. Isa nodded, tears welling. "He said you died in childbirth." Lena closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them, resolve shining through her grief. "We need to talk, really talk," she said softly, rising and guiding Isa to a chair beside the window where sunlight pooled like liquid gold. She fetched a small box from the mantel, a wooden keepsake filled with photographs and letters, and sat back down, Isa leaning forward, hunger and hope in her gaze. "This was the last photo I ever sent your father," Lena began, lifting an image of herself cradling newborn Isa. In the background, Edward stood by the hospital bed, tears in his eyes. "I had just given birth to you," she said, voice catching. I was exhausted but overjoyed. Isa reached out, fingertips brushing the photo. "What happened next?" Lena looked down at her hands. "That night, my heart just stopped. They called it sudden cardiac arrest, no warning, nothing anyone could have prevented." She swallowed. "I woke up and they told me you were gone too." Isa's chest tightened. "But I'm here," she whispered. "Yes," Lena nodded, tears slipping free. "Against all odds, the doctors revived me, but they were too late for you." She lifted her gaze, fierce and determined. "Your father was devastated. He'd just lost a wife and a child. He returned to the hospital room, searched everywhere, but you were gone." Isa closed her eyes, the wounds reopening like fresh cuts. "So he lied," she said. "He told me you both died, that he adopted me because I had no one." Lena reached across the small table, and took Isa's hand. "He thought he was protecting you from the pain, from the loss. He built a life for you, filling it with love and stability, and he believed the truth would break you. Issa's tears fell freely now. He fired Maria too, because she helped me uncover this. Lena's eyes burned. We will fix that. Maria is as much family as you are. Issa lifted her head. I want to know everything. About you, about him, and about my life before I came here. Lena gave her a small, sad smile. Then let us begin. She opened the wooden box and drew out a faded birth certificate. Then old letters from Edward, his heartbreak and plea for forgiveness inked on each page. As Lena read them aloud, her voice steady, Issa felt the final pieces of her past click into place, and for the first time, she understood the true measure of her father's love and his fear. Outside, the late afternoon sun dipped toward the horizon, but inside that humble living room, daughter and mother kindled a new beginning, built on truth at last revealed. Edward's grip tightened, and Issa cried out as pain flared in her wrist. Lena's eyes blazed with fury as she stepped between Issa and her father. "Let her go, Edward," he sneered, dragging Issa forward by her arm. "Outside," he repeated. "Now." Issa glanced back at Lena, silent tears streaking her cheeks. The rage and betrayal she felt knotted her stomach tighter than any fear. Summoning every ounce of courage, she wrenched her arm free with a sudden yank. Edward staggered, surprised, as Issa stood firm, hand on her hip. "No," she said, voice trembling but resolute. "Not until you explain everything. Right here." Edward's jaw snapped shut. For a tense heartbeat, he stared at her, as though trying to decide whether to strike again. Then his shoulders slumped as though the weight of his secrets had finally crushed him. He dropped the keys onto the coffee table, the clatter echoing like a verdict. Lena rushed to Issa's side, pressing her gentle hand to her daughter's trembling arm. "Are you all right, sweetheart?" she whispered. Issa nodded, still gasping for breath but fierce. She turned to face her father, whose eyes were haunted now with sorrow instead of rage. "Why?" she began, voice quavering yet loud enough to fill the room. "Did you hide my mother from me? Why did you fire Maria for helping me? Why did you make me believe you adopted me?" Edward's head dipped, and he ran a hand through his hair, his composure unraveling. I thought I was protecting you," he finally admitted, each word heavy with regret. "After Lena died, and I lost you in that hospital room, I couldn't bear the pain. I was lost without you. I didn't know how to be a widower and a father to a newborn." His voice cracked. "So I built a new reality. I told judges you were orphaned. I told you I adopted you, hoping you'd never ask for your mother. I kept Maria away so she wouldn't tell you what she knew." Issa swallowed, tears spilling again. "You lied about everything," she whispered. "You made me doubt everyone I loved." Lena stepped forward and took Edward's hand. "You weren't alone," she said softly, voice shaking with emotion. "You had me, and you had Maria. We both wanted to protect Issa." Edward sank to the couch, burying his face in his hands. "I know I was wrong. I was so afraid of losing you both again." Issa watched him, torn between anger and pity. She breathed out slowly. "I'm here now," she said, "and I want the truth. All of it." Edward lifted his head, tears glinting on his cheeks. "I will tell you everything," he promised. "I'll show you every letter, every photo. And I'll make things right with Maria, I swear I will." Lena reached out and patted Issa's hand. The two women exchanged a look of cautious hope. Outside, the afternoon sun dipped low, but within the living room, a new beginning flickered to life. A family fractured by grief and lies, now taking its first steps toward honesty and healing. After a long moment, Lena drew in a trembling breath and continued, her gaze never leaving Issa's. "After I gave birth to you, I discovered that Edward had been married before, a first wife named Margaret, who couldn't have children of her own and begged him to adopt you. He promised her anything she wanted if I relinquished you. When I refused, he divorced me, and the court, seeing Edward's wealth and influence, granted me custody, but ordered me to vacate our marital home. That's how this house became mine and how you remained with him." She swallowed hard. "I raised you for a year before the divorce was finalized, but Edward paid off every relative who might have come for you, buried every record of your birth mother, and vowed to keep you safe in a life that held no reminders of me." Isa pressed her hand to her chest, shocked speechless as she realized how completely her father had rewritten her history. Edward's face, illuminated by the single bare bulb hanging overhead, flickered with regret and anger both. He ran a hand over his face. "I did what I thought best," he muttered, voice breaking. "I loved you, and I loved Margaret too." "I never meant for you to hate me." "Hate you?" Isa's voice cracked as she pulled at her ropes until they rubbed her wrists raw. "I don't hate you, but I can't live a lie." Edward closed his eyes and exhaled slowly. "I know this is cruel," he admitted, reaching toward them, but his hands trembled and he drew back. "I'm sorry you had to learn it this way." Isa and Lena locked eyes, mother and daughter, bound by truth at last. Isa nodded to Lena, and together they stood, rubbing their sore wrists, approaching Edward as one. "We want to be a family," Lena said quietly, "but only if it's real, no more secrets." Edward's shoulders sagged. He glanced at the tangled ropes still around their wrists, then bent and untied Lena first, his fingers gentle. As he knelt to free Isa, his voice was barely a whisper. "I've betrayed your trust. I'll spend the rest of my life earning it back if you'll let me." Isa rubbed her wrists and looked at both her parents, tears and relief mingling in her chest like sunlight after a storm. "Start by telling me everything," she said, voice firm. "I need to know who I am. No more surprises." Edward straightened, wiped his eyes, and nodded. "Then let's go downstairs," he said softly. "I have so much to explain." Together the three of them descended the attic stairs, step by careful step, toward a new beginning built on honesty, forgiveness, and the promise that, this time, nothing would ever be hidden again. Officer Brennan cleared his throat, the afternoon light slanting through the foyer and highlighting the tension on Edward's face. "Ms. Alvarez asserts that you refused to return property belonging to her, gold bars she entrusted to your safe, after terminating her employment, and that you subsequently confined 2 women against their will in your attic." Edward's practiced mask faltered for the briefest instant, the guilt he'd bottled all day threatening to spill forth, but he recovered instantly. "This is preposterous, officers," he began, voice smooth but laced with panic beneath the surface. "There must be some misunderstanding. Maria left of her own accord, and there's no one else in my house but my daughter, who is perfectly safe." At a signal from Brennan, 2 uniformed officers swept past Edward and into the hallway, weapons lowered. But at the ready, while Officer Brennan turned back to Maria. "Ms. Alvarez, would you please point us to where your property was kept and where these women were held?" With a steady voice that belied the tremor in her heart, Maria led the group upstairs, Edward trailing behind like a wounded animal, every step echoing with the weight of his misdeeds. "It was in the attic safe," she explained firmly, her eyes sweeping the landing and locking on Edward's downward cast gaze. "And the women, my employer's daughter and Ms. Lena Rivera, were bound against their will just moments ago." Isa and Lena heard the officer's boots on the stair treads and the unmistakable clatter of keys against Edward's clothing. Their breaths, ragged with fear and hope, found new strength when the attic door swung open under the officer's forceful push. In the doorway, Agent Collins barked, "Hands where we can see them, Mr. Caldwell!" Edward froze, realizing that the carefully constructed world he'd built was crumbling around him. Isa and Lena stumbled from their beam-bound positions, rushing forward as Officer Sanders gently cut through their ropes and removed their gags. Maria stepped aside to embrace Isa, brushing dust from her hair and cradling Lena's hand in solidarity. Officer Brennan placed Edward in handcuffs with an air of grim satisfaction. "You're under arrest for unlawful confinement, assault, and theft," he informed Edward, reading his rights crisp and clear. Edward met the announcement with a hollow gaze, the last bastion of his composure slipping away as he was led down the stairs, past the daughter and woman whose lives he'd nearly destroyed in his quest for control. In the quiet aftermath, Isa turned to her mother, tears mingling with relief. "Are you all right?" she asked, voice catching. Lena smiled through her tears, pulling Isa into a fierce hug. "I am now," she whispered. Maria knelt beside them, pressing Isa's hand to her cheek. "You're both safe," she said, glancing at the officers as they secured the attic. "No one will ever hurt you again." As the sun dipped low in the sky, casting long shadows across the Caldwell estate, Isa, Lena, and Maria stood together in the foyer. A new kind of family forged not from secrets and fear, but from truth, courage, and forgiveness, ready to face the future, come what may. Edward's body jolted violently as the taser darts sank into his flesh. He collapsed to the cobblestone driveway in a heap, muscles twitching uncontrollably. The younger officer holstered the taser and immediately kicked Edward's arm away from the velvet pouch, then knelt to slap on handcuffs. "You're under arrest for assault and obstruction of justice," he barked, loading the pouch back into evidence. Inside, the other officers burst through the attic door, guns drawn but quickly lowered once they saw Lena unbound and Isa grasping her mother's hand, both shaken but unharmed. Officer Johnson called downstairs. "It's secure up here. No one else is hiding." Officer Martinez checked Isa's wrists, brushing away dust and tears. "You're safe now," he reassured her gently, his tone as calm as it was authoritative. Maria, still gasping from Edward's kick, rose unsteadily. She waved the bank transfer receipt and text message screenshots at Officer Brennan, who accepted them gratefully. "We'll make sure you get every ounce of your property back," he promised, guiding her to sign an evidentiary statement. Isa slid her arm around Maria's waist, both of them breathing in relief and solidarity. Outside, Lena stepped over Edward's motionless form, kneeling beside him to check his pulse. When she rose, she turned to Isa and Maria with a soft, weary smile. "He can hurt us no more," she said, her voice thick with emotion. Isa reached for her mother's hand before glancing back at the subdued figure in handcuffs. "Thank you for everything," she whispered, leaning into Lena's shoulder. As the patrol car's sirens faded down the driveway and the late afternoon sky turned amber, Isa, Lena, and Maria stood on the front steps of the Caldwell mansion, no longer prisoners of secrecy, but a family bound by truth and the promise of a new beginning. Continuous knocking on the heavy oak front door announced the arrival of legal aid and child services to ensure Isa's safety and Maria's restitution. Yet in that moment, with the weight of Edward's betrayal lifting, they simply held one another, ready at last to rebuild a life founded on honesty, love, and freedom. That afternoon, as the sedan slid to a stop in front of the Foster family's modest home, Isa took a steadying breath. The driver, a kindly social worker named Ms. Ramirez, opened the back door and offered Isa a gentle smile. "Welcome, Isabella. This is the Johnsons, your temporary placement." Through the window, Isa spotted a warm living room, soft morning light filtering through pale curtains, a plush couch piled with colorful pillows, and on the wall, a hand-painted family portrait. She opened the door, clutching her small suitcase, and stepped onto the porch. Mrs. Johnson, a tall woman with braided hair and a bright, easy laugh, hurried forward. "Hi, Isa. I'm Marisol Johnson, and this is my husband, Hector." Hector, a broad-shouldered man wearing a work shirt and paint-splattered jeans, gave her a reassuring nod. Behind them stood their two children, a plateau-eyed boy of 10 and a giggling 6-year-old girl who waved enthusiastically. Issa's chest tightened, but she forced a small smile. Miss Ramirez introduced them formally. The Johnsons will care for you while we finalize arrangements with Ms. Alvarez. We're aiming for no more than 2 weeks. Inside, Mrs. Johnson showed Issa to her temporary bedroom, a small but cheerful space with a single bed, fresh linens, and a little desk by the window. You can decorate it however you like, she said kindly, placing a vase of cut flowers on the nightstand. We have extra hangers and towels, too. Issa set down her suitcase, feeling a pang of homesickness for the grand hallways of the Caldwell mansion, but also relief at the absence of locked doors and shouted orders. Here, the air was warm and unguarded. That evening, after dinner, tacos and rice, just like she remembered eating at home, Issa sat cross-legged at the Johnsons' kitchen table, drawing the family portrait she'd glimpsed, adding herself and Maria, Mrs. Johnson peeked over her shoulder. You're quite the artist. Issa shrugged, trying to sound casual. It's how I remember home. Across town, Maria stood on the threshold of her brother's cramped apartment. She'd liquidated every last piece of jewelry, found odd jobs cleaning offices at night, and scoured listings for a one-bedroom she could afford. Yet so far, nothing had panned out. Tonight, she collapsed onto her brother's couch, exhaustion etched in her bones. She pulled out her phone and dialed Issa's number, a special long-distance plan Ms. Chen had approved for weekly calls. Miss Issa? The Johnsons had arranged a 5-minute check-in. Issa's bright voice floated through the speaker. Maria, how are you? I'm okay, mi amor, Maria whispered as tears blurred her vision. I found a room with a landlady who'll rent to me next week. I start cleaning a bank lobby at dawn. I love you so much. Issa's voice cracked. I love you too. Thank you for everything. They lingered on the line until Ms. Johnson gently reminded Issa to get ready for bed. As Issa hung up, she pressed the phone to her heart. Over the next 10 days, social services moved swiftly. Maria submitted her proof of stable income and references from Carla, who vouched for Issa's good character, and the Johnsons, who confirmed Issa's happiness in their care. At the family court hearing, Lena appeared via video link, now cleared of the drug allegations when lab results returned negative. She and Maria sat side by side, proof that a support network existed far stronger than any mansion's walls. When the judge signed the guardianship papers, Maria wept openly, and Lena blew Issa a triumphant kiss from the screen. Ms. Chen, smiling through tears, placed the official decree in Maria's hands. You're officially Isabella's guardian, she pronounced. Welcome home. That afternoon, Maria arrived at the Johnsons to collect Issa. The two embraced in the driveway until Mrs. Johnson discreetly wiped tears from her own eyes. As they drove past the old Caldwell estate, its windows shuttered, police tape gone, the houses looked smaller, empty of warmth. Inside Maria's new rental, they unpacked boxes of bedtime stories, family photos, and homemade cookies. Issa's laughter rang through the small living room as she placed her drawing on the mantel. A new family portrait, this one real. That night, before drifting to sleep in her own bed, Issa pressed her hand to the blank wall above her head and whispered, I'm safe. Below, Maria closed the door on the small bedroom she'd cleared for her daughter, smoothing the covers and hanging. Issa's drawing within view. As she flipped off the light, she whispered a prayer of gratitude and hope. In the days that followed, life found a new rhythm. School resumed, the foster care file closed, Maria's first paycheck in hand, and Sunday afternoon visits from Lena, now free to openly shower her daughter with love. The shadows Edward Caldwell cast over their lives had finally been banished by truth, courage, and the unbreakable bond between a girl and the woman who had always been her guardian, her friend, and, at last, her mother.